G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome to my skill gem analysis and mechanics breakdown for Herald of Thunder. This is the new skill being added in patch 1.2.4. It's in line with the other two Herald skills, Herald of Ice and Herald of Ash. And this one instead adds lightning damage to your attacks and spells, and then has the cool secondary effect of creating a Storm Herald around your character after you kill a shocked enemy. Now you'll notice that my Molten Shell just killed some enemies just there, and is now proceeding to kill everything with the lightning bolts. And the reason for that is that even my Molten Shell has the added lightning on it because it's a global added lightning. So that's just like an interesting first note to start off with there. So we can see my Molten Shell over here. You know, obviously Molten Shell doesn't shock enemies, nor does it have lightning damage, but if I actually go over to my Molten Shell here, you can see it has added 4 to 52 lightning damage, and because this is a low level zone, that's able to shock and kill enemies in the one blast just there, and that's actually proccing it as well. So just an example of some of the small added benefits you can get there, but also the fact that this damage bonus is applying globally there as well, even to things procced by cast when damage taken. So like the other Herald skills, this reserves 25% of your mana, like an aura would, but it's not actually an aura. This is a buff skill. That means that although aura reduction does apply, aura effectiveness does not apply to these sorts of things. So you can reduce the amount of mana that it reserves because these are just reduced mana reservation, but you can't actually buff the effect through these sorts of nodes. However, things like Inner Force will still work, as this is increased effective buffs on you, so that will increase the amount of bonus damage you get from Herald of Thunder. Now, Herald of Thunder itself could not actually shock, and what that means is that the lightning bolts that come down after you proc it with another skill that has shocked and killed enemies, it means that those actual lightning bolts cannot shock. So basically, the skill cannot proc itself indefinitely. It will not keep itself rolling. However, there are some crazy ways of doing that with certain uniques, like I mentioned in the teaser video, combining certain uniques and other effects, like for example 3 dragons and the Pyre Ring, to create some sort of like cyclical shocking effect to keep it going, but those sorts of things don't seem like a very efficient way to keep this spell going. The most common and efficient way that people are going to keep this spell going is either by using lightning spells or by using attacks with added lightning damage, so something like Spectral Throw with Herald of Thunder and Wrath to add lightning damage. These sorts of things are going to add lightning damage. If you're on a crit build, you're going to be shocking all the time, or if you have the chance to shock nodes from the tree like I do here, shock chance and shock chance over here, then you're going to be shocking things pretty often and keeping it going. So for example, on this character I'm using Stormcall. If I take out one of those guys on the edge there, you can see that it starts proccing and starts zapping all the guys around me. Now, an important thing to note in the scaling of Herald of Thunder is that this is not actually a spell. It doesn't deal spell damage. So this is something Rory pointed out to me when I was discussing the skill with him, and that you can't buff it through spell damage increases. So if you're picking up, for example, some spell damage here, this is not actually going to buff the strike damage, the on-strike damage of Herald of Thunder. However, spell damage will still buff the added damage if you're using a spell to kind of cast that, or to channel that added damage. So, for example, I'm using Stormcall. Even if this wasn't, if I was using Glacial Cascade or something like that, as long as it was a spell, the added lightning would also be considered spell damage, so that will scale that. So if you're mostly focusing on that added lightning damage, then spell damage, if you're using a spell, is still going to scale that. But however, if you want to try and make the lightning bolts as strong as possible, then you want to be scaling either elemental damage, which will increase the damage of the striking bolts, or you want to be scaling lightning damage, obviously, as it is lightning damage. Anything like lightning penetration and things like that can help. Now, you can support this with things like lightning penetration to increase the amount of damage it does, though keep in mind the mana multiplier will increase the mana reserved by Herald of Thunder. So you can see this reserves 36% linked to reduced mana and increased AoE. If I take out lightning penetration, drops down 24%. If I take out increased area of effect, with only supported by reduced mana, and some of my aura nodes, it's down to 16%. So you have to kind of plan your auras around the idea of if you'll be using some support gems to support that actual skill. Now this is sort of moves into an interesting point just here, the actual range of Herald of Thunder. Now on this character I have several of the AoE nodes. I have both of the AoE clusters in Templar and Witch, and I'm using increased AoE on my Herald of Thunder. Now I can strike some enemies here, hopefully killing some of these guys, and you can see the sort of the range there is probably about to here on my screen, around this sort of areas there, so like 2/3 of my screen. Now the default range of Herald of Thunder is, in Path of Exile game sense, is 32. So that's on the in-game systems. But to give that you guys a sort of a visual representation of that, it's about the slightly larger than the range of Ice Nova. Now I can't show you the normal range of Ice Nova because this character has increased AoE, and there is an Ice Nova with increased AoE, so it's going to be slightly smaller than that because I have the increase there. So let's say about 75 to 80% of the size of that Ice Nova just there. So it's not a large Nova by any means, and this is going to mean that if you're not playing an increased AoE character of any type, or if you're not planning on linking it with increased AoE to give you sort of more range, Herald of Thunder is going to work best for melee characters or characters that get in close, and that's kind of cool. I like that they're putting in something that is a potential little buff to melee characters just there. So if you're playing like a crit dagger with some added lightning damage sort of build and you're getting up close, maybe using a bit of lightning strike action, maybe you're using some double strike, and maybe using a little bit of spectral throw when you do need range, then that's going to be a sort of a bit of a buff to you. When you're in close, you're going to be dealing additional AoE damage around your character. Now another interesting thing to note is about how the actual lightning strikes work. So the lightning strikes have two separate internal cooldowns. There is a target cooldown of 400 milliseconds. That means the lightning strikes can only ever possibly target the same mob once every 400 milliseconds. So, and then there's a global strike cooldown as well, which is 250 milliseconds. So you will actually put out more damage if you're surrounded by more enemies. So this becomes less effective as a single target and more effective as an AoE skill. So it might be a bit difficult to demonstrate this on these skeletons just here, but you can kind of get the idea of how quickly it'll strike a single target, and then it'll start looking a lot more active and busy when you're striking multiple targets. Now I'm not sure what the practical applications of this knowledge are, the strike cooldowns for the two separate things, so the 400 single target strike cooldown and the 250 global cooldown. I'm not sure what the practical applications of that are, but I just thought it was interesting to actually know that. Now another thing I'd like to point out, because I think some people might try and build around this idea, is that the damage of the secondary strike of the actual lightning strikes is what's known as, in the Path of Exile game sense, as secondary damage. This means it cannot have added damage from things like Herald of Ice. So if you're planning on using Herald of Ice to give yourself some added cold damage on your lightning strikes from Herald of Thunder, then that's not actually going to work. Because what happens is that damage applies to you and spells cast by you, but Herald of Thunder is not really a spell cast by you. The damage put out by it is not a spell cast by you. The things that are cast by you is the added damage on the spells that you do cast. Now that's not to say that you can't support this with things like added lightning or added cold damage that add flat extra elemental damage to anything. You can certainly support it with that, and if you want to do that to provide extra damage to those skills or extra freeze chance with added cold, then you're welcome to do so, and you will be able to do that. Now it's still a bit too early to say what the actual damage values will be at higher levels of Herald of Thunder, and of course I haven't been able to work it up that high yet. It's going to take a little while for anyone to get like a level 20 Herald of Thunder, but Rory said that after testing it they actually buffed the damage of the late game Herald of Thunder lightning strikes. They actually wanted it to be a significant source of damage, so the wording of Rory was that so it does a fair amount of damage at higher levels. So that should mean that this is something you can build around as an AoE damage output. You could have a character that has a very small AoE or even a single target setup and use this as your extra added AoE damage to take out larger packs, and that should be somewhat viable. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. Now, a final thing to note, and something that I think will probably be pretty useful for people trying to build around this skill and create an effective means of keeping this skill going all the time, is that Herald of Thunder can reproc itself if it does kill a shocked enemy. So that means skills that have added lightning damage or lightning spells using elemental proliferation are going to be fairly effective. So that means I can switch out something like lightning penetration here. What I can do is I can try and kill just some of these targets, and that if I can get a shocked enemy to die and proliferate that status there, which we might be a little bit too difficult to do here. I'll try and get it to work. I'm not having much luck with it. These guys actually don't leave corpses, that's why. Okay, let me go find another pack. Yeah, you need to leave a corpse to be able to actually proliferate lightning from a corpse. Okay, so I'll shock some of these guys just here, and you can see the elemental proliferation here. If these guys come into effect and get proliferated with lightning and then killed, that'll actually keep the Herald of Thunder going. So that guy there just died while shocked from the proliferation, and that's actually kept the Herald of Thunder rolling for an additional 6 seconds. So with an elemental proliferation spec, even if you're not killing very many enemies, if you're just every now and then tagging an enemy, proliferating into a pack, and then having them die from the shocks, which we can probably get to happen just here, and that'll keep it going for another 6 seconds there, so we should be able to keep that rolling. It's very easy to actually keep it up. 6 seconds is more than long enough to keep it up, I think. Although you can support this skill with increased duration if you, I guess, don't want to hit enemies or kill enemies very often. I think 6 seconds is very easy to keep up, especially if you're using Proliferate to proliferate those shock stacks. And do keep in mind that the shock stacks are also going to increase the damage that mobs take from those lightning strikes. So I think that's a pretty efficient and effective way to play this skill. So overall, I think this is a pretty cool addition to the game. For a lot of characters, it's just going to be an added lightning damage to give them more lightning damage on their attacks, maybe give them a few extra shocks there, and also give them a bit of passive extra AoE damage. But I also suspect it will be strong enough to be built around as a primary AoE, as like one of your main sources of AoE damage. So I am very interested to see what sort of builds this enables, especially because thematically it's just so damn cool. Like getting those lightning hands, or rad lightning hands as I put it in the teaser video, and also having it sort of just have really nice synergy with lightning spellcaster specs, and hopefully bringing lightning up a little bit out of the ashes of burned prolif builds. I think will be a good thing for the game, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with this. Anyway, hopefully you found some of the info in this video useful. If you have any further questions about the skill, I do probably know a few things that I can't just like think of off the top of my head here, but feel free to ask in the comments below, and you might be able to provoke some of that info to come out. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.